Have you ever wondered if someone from the future might be living among us right now? Throughout history, there have been people who appeared out of nowhere, spoke of events that hadn't happened yet, or carried objects that didn't exist in their time. Their stories were dismissed as hoaxes, yet many details they shared later turned out to be real. From strange visitors who predicted future wars to men who vanished without explanation, these cases continue to puzzle investigators and historians alike. Keep watching as we uncover time travelers who many believe were actually real.
A Missouri worker set out to make a time machine on his back porch. The contraption he came up with was not completely off the mark, according to scientists. There are theoretical physicists working on those areas, and it's not total nonsense, according to the chairman at the physics department at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. The Stanberry police say the voltage that Markham had diverted into the contraption caused power interruptions in and around the northwest Missouri town of about 1300. Markham was arrested January 29th on a felony charge of stealing the transformers from a power generating station in Kings City. He pleaded guilty, and last month was placed on 5 years probation. Police said the transformers had a capacity of 12 to 76,000 volts each, enough to easily cause electrocution or an explosion. Markham, who told police that he has 2 years of college-level electrical engineering, said he was building a time machine, but didn't have enough power for it. That's according to the Stanberry Police Chief Tom Hampton.
John Titor. In the early 2000s, a man appeared on online forums claiming to be a time traveler from the year 2036. He called himself John Titor. What started as a few cryptic messages on a discussion board quickly turned into one of the most discussed internet mysteries of all time. Titor's posts were written in a calm, matter-of-fact tone. He wasn't selling anything, didn't seem to want fame, and spoke as if he were genuinely reporting from another time. According to his story, John Titor was a soldier from the future, born in 1998, serving in a military unit that specialized in time travel. He said he was sent back to 1975 to retrieve an IBM 5100 computer. The reason was specific. The IBM 5100 had unique features that allowed it to read and debug older computer code, something needed to fix critical systems in his timeline. On his way back to 2036, he said he stopped in the year 2000 to visit family and observe the time period before a coming disaster. That detail, simple yet oddly personal, made his story sound more human than the average hoax. Titor described a future that was grim. He said that after 2004, the United States would face deep political division leading to civil unrest. According to him, the country would break into 5 regions based on political and social differences. By 2015, a global nuclear war would erupt, destroying many major cities and killing millions. Afterward, the survivors would rebuild society into smaller, more community-based systems. His version of the future was harsh but structured, almost like a warning disguised as a diary. When he spoke about the technology of time travel, his answers were surprisingly detailed. He explained that his time machine was a C204 gravity distortion unit made by General Electric. He even described how it worked: 2 miniature black holes inside the machine that bent space-time, mounted inside a standard car, a 1967 Chevrolet Corvette in one version, later mentioned as a 4-wheel drive truck. He posted diagrams showing how the machine would shift through different world lines, parallel universes with slight variations from our own. His explanation used real scientific terms like Kerr black holes and Tipler cylinders, which gave his story a strange credibility among those familiar with theoretical physics. Skeptics quickly appeared, pointing out inconsistencies and asking for proof. People asked for photographs of the future or events that could be verified later. Titor avoided the showy kind of evidence people wanted, claiming that proving his story too clearly would interfere with the timeline. He said that every time traveler moves between world lines, not back along a single fixed history. That meant his predictions might not perfectly match ours because our world line was slightly different. This idea protected him from being proven wrong, but also kept his story within a believable frame of possibility. Over time, some of Titor's predictions appeared to miss their mark. The Civil War he spoke of never erupted in 2004, and no nuclear exchange took place in 2015. Yet some of his followers argued that his warnings about growing political division and global instability were not entirely off base. Many saw echoes of his claims in the increasing polarization of politics, surveillance systems, and international tension. To them, his timeline had simply diverged from ours, but his message remained a kind of cautionary tale. Investigations into Titer's identity began soon after he vanished from the forums in 2001. A group called the John Titor Foundation even appeared, claiming to represent him and publishing a book based on his posts. Internet sleuths traced IP addresses, analyzed his writing style, and searched for any clues that could tie him to a real person. One theory pointed to a lawyer named Larry Haber and his brother, a computer scientist, who were suspected of creating the story as a hoax or an art project. They denied it. Others believe Titor was an early example of collaborative fiction written by multiple people to create a self-sustaining myth. But what kept the story alive wasn't just the predictions, it was the way Titor spoke. He didn't sound like a prankster or a science fiction writer. His tone was direct, even cold at times, but carried a sense of calm realism. When people asked about everyday life in 2036, he described a world that felt possible: smaller communities, simpler technology, and a strong sense of local trade. He said the internet still existed but was more controlled and fragmented. Books were more valued, and people relied on personal knowledge rather than mass systems. It painted a believable, if uncomfortable, image of a post-collapse society. Rudolf Fens. The story of Rudolf Fens is one of the oldest and most talked-about cases connected to supposed time travel. It has been told for decades as the mysterious tale of a man who appeared out of nowhere in the middle of New York City dressed like someone from another century, and then vanished from history just as strangely. For years, people repeated the story as proof that time travel might have already happened. But when the details were finally examined, the truth behind the legend turned out to be very different from what most people expected. The story goes back to a warm evening in June 1950. A man was seen standing in the middle of Times Square, confused and looking around as if he had never seen a city before. Witnesses claimed he was wearing clothes that were completely outdated: a long coat, high-buttoned shoes, and a top hat, more fitting for the 19th century than post-war America. In his pocket, he carried old banknotes, a business card with his name Rudolf Fens, and a letter dated from the late 1800s. Moments later, the man reportedly stepped into the street and was hit by a car. When the police checked his belongings, nothing about him made sense for 1950. According to the tale, investigators traced the name on the business card and discovered that a man named Rudolf Fens had indeed lived in New York City, but in 1876. Records showed that he disappeared one night after leaving home for a walk and was never seen again. The description of that man supposedly matched the one from the accident in 1950. There were no fingerprints, no family connections, and no record of the man existing in between those years. This was the detail that made the story famous. It looked as though the same man had vanished in the 19th century and suddenly reappeared 74 years later without aging a day. For decades, this story circulated in newspapers, radio shows, and later on the internet. It was often used as one of the strongest real-life proofs of time travel. The description was so detailed and believable that even skeptical people found it hard to completely dismiss. Many articles claimed the police file was authentic and kept in the archives of New York City, adding a sense of authority to the mystery. But when researchers started digging deeper, the cracks began to show. In the 1970s, a researcher named Chris Albeck traced the origins of the story. He found that no police report about such an event ever existed in New York. There were no traffic records, no coroner's report, and no mention in newspapers from 1950 about a man named Rudolf Fens dying in Times Square. Instead, the entire story matched a fictional short story titled "I'm Scared," written by Jack Finney in 1951. Finney was a well-known author who later wrote Time and Again, a famous novel about time travel. The Fens story appeared in Collier's magazine before it ever appeared in supposed real accounts. So what happened was simple. A piece of fiction was mistaken or intentionally presented as a true story. Over the years, people retold it with small changes, dropping the original author's name and adding details like official police records to make it sound more believable. By the time the internet era began, the myth had taken full form, circulating on countless real mysteries, websites, and in books about the unexplained. Mike Madman Markham. Mike Madman Markham's story is one of those modern legends that sits halfway between science experiment and mystery. He wasn't a scientist or a physicist. He was a young man from Missouri who believed he could build a time machine in his backyard. What made his story stand out was not just the claim, it was the strange chain of events that followed, and the fact that he actually built something that seemed to work, at least for a moment. It started in 1995. Mike Markham was an electrical engineering student with a deep curiosity about how time and energy might connect. He became fascinated by the idea of creating a time portal using electromagnetic energy. He began experimenting in his home, building a device he called the Jacob's Ladder. Normally, a Jacob's Ladder is just a pair of wires with electricity arcing between them, forming a continuous spark that climbs upward. But Markham modified his version by adding a compact disc laser, thinking it might help create a more stable and focused electromagnetic field. When he turned on the device, something unexpected happened. According to Markham, he saw a small swirling vortex appear above the machine. It wasn't large, just a few inches wide, but he said that when he threw a metal screw into it, the screw disappeared for a second and then reappeared a few feet away. The event left him both amazed and determined to make the device bigger. He believed he had discovered a small-scale distortion in time, but building a larger version required more power. Markham didn't have the equipment or funding to continue safely, so he did something reckless. He stole several heavy-duty transformers from a local power station. That theft got him caught and arrested. During his arrest, he explained that he needed the transformers for his time travel experiment, which earned him the nickname Madman Markham. After serving a short sentence, he was released and surprisingly still wanted to continue his work. In 1996, he appeared on Coast to Coast AM, a popular late-night radio show known for covering UFOs, conspiracies, and paranormal stories. On air, Markham talked about what had happened with his first machine and his plan to rebuild it, this time safely and legally. He wanted to create a vortex large enough for a person to step through. The host, Art Bell, asked him if he was afraid of what might happen. Markham said he wasn't. He insisted that if it worked, it would prove time travel was possible. After that first radio appearance, listeners were fascinated. Many sent him donations and old equipment to help him continue his project. Months later, he returned to the show and said he was close to finishing a full-scale version of the device. He estimated the vortex would be big enough for him to walk into. He even claimed that his calculations suggested it would work better with more power and a stronger magnetic field. Then he disappeared. After his second appearance, Mike Markham stopped responding to calls and letters. No one could reach him, and he was never heard from again. The sudden silence fueled speculation that he had actually stepped into his machine and vanished. A few years later, a strange story began circulating online. Someone claimed that a man's body had been found in the 1930s in California, burned, crushed, and surrounded by mysterious metal fragments. He supposedly carried a device resembling a modern-day cell phone. Some linked that discovery to Markham, suggesting he had traveled back in time and died there. Paul Amadeus. Paul Amadeus Dianoc is one of the most unusual figures linked to the idea of time travel, not because he built a machine, but because he claimed to have lived in the future through his consciousness. His story is strange, calm, and deeply personal, unlike other cases filled with machines and science fiction. It begins in Europe during the early 20th century, with a man who never intended for his writings to be published or even known outside a small circle of friends. Paul Amadeus Dianoc was a Swiss-Austrian teacher who lived a quiet life. Around 1921, he fell into a deep coma that lasted for about a year after suffering from a serious illness. When he eventually woke up, everything around him seemed the same, but inside he carried memories that were not from the world he had left. According to Dianoch, during that long period of unconsciousness, his mind had somehow traveled into the body of another person living in the year 3906. He said he experienced life through the eyes of that man and spent months in that distant future before waking up back in his own time. When Dianoch recovered, he wrote everything he remembered in a large journal, over 800 pages of notes describing what he saw, how society had changed, and what had happened to humanity in the thousands of years that passed between his time and the future he claimed to visit. He didn't see himself as a prophet or a philosopher. He was a simple man trying to record an experience that he couldn't explain. He didn't try to publish his notes while he was alive, fearing people would think he was insane. In those writings, Dianoch described a future world that had gone through major transformations. He said humanity had faced devastating wars and social collapse before eventually rebuilding into a peaceful, united civilization. In that time, people no longer lived in nations but in a global community. Technology had advanced beyond anything imaginable in the 1920s, but it wasn't the focus of life. Instead, people valued knowledge, spirituality, and the evolution of the human mind. According to him, humans in 3906 had developed a deeper understanding of consciousness itself. They believed the human soul could move through time, connecting different lives and generations. Dianoch said that while living in the future, he inhabited the body of a man named Andreas Northam. Through Northam's memories and interactions, he learned about the world's history between the 20th and 39th centuries. He described events such as the Great Disaster of the 21st century, a massive global conflict followed by a period of rebirth. He wrote about how humanity would eventually overcome its divisions and learn to live in balance with the planet. His writings contained no wild talk of flying cars or alien invasions, just a vision of humanity slowly evolving through hardship toward understanding. After Dianoch's death in 1924, his writings might have been lost forever if not for one of his students, a man named George Papahatsis. Years later, Papahatsis, who was Greek, translated the journals into Greek and kept them safe. He believed that Dianoch's words carried an important message for the future. Eventually, the translated manuscript spread among small academic and philosophical circles in Greece, and people began to see Dianoch as a man who had somehow witnessed humanity's distant tomorrow. Time traveler at the Mike Tyson fight. The story of the time traveler at the Mike Tyson fight is one of the most famous modern examples of how a single photograph can spark years of speculation. It all began with a short clip from a boxing match that took place in 1995, when Mike Tyson was returning to the ring after serving his prison sentence. Tyson was fighting Peter McNeely at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and the event was packed with reporters, photographers, and fans. But decades later, something strange caught people's attention in the footage. A person in the crowd holding what looked like a modern smartphone, pointing it at the ring to record the match. The fight itself was historic for Tyson. It was his big comeback, and it only lasted a few minutes before McNeely's corner threw in the towel. But the moment that would later cause a stir wasn't in the punches. It was in a single frame of video showing the audience. Near the ropes, someone could be seen holding a small, flat, rectangular device up in front of their face, just like people do when recording with a phone. What made this unusual is that in 1995, smartphones with cameras didn't exist. The first commercial phone with a camera, the Kyocera VP210, wasn't released until 1999, and it didn't look anything like the sleek object in the photo. When the clip resurfaced on the internet years later, many viewers froze the frame and zoomed in. The device had a lens in the top corner and looked almost exactly like an early 2000s smartphone or even a modern iPhone. The internet exploded with theories. Some said it was proof of time travel. Someone from the future had attended Tyson's fight and recorded the event with technology that didn't yet exist. Others claimed it was evidence of parallel timelines or visitors from alternate realities blending into the past. As the video spread across YouTube and Reddit, people began examining every detail. They compared lighting reflections, the person's hand position, and even the shadow of the device to figure out if it was authentic or digitally altered. Some insisted it couldn't have been anything available in 1995, while others dug through old tech catalogs trying to prove it could. The mystery became a kind of internet detective case. Eventually, a more grounded explanation appeared. Tech enthusiasts pointed out that in the mid-90s, several compact cameras existed that resembled the shape of a modern phone. One example was the Casio QV100, an early digital camera released in 1995, the very same year as the Tyson fight. It had a silver body, a lens on one corner, and a small screen on the back. When held up to take a picture, it looked almost identical to how someone would hold a smartphone today. That explanation fit perfectly with what was seen in the video. Still, the mystery refused to die. Even with a logical answer, many people felt the resemblance was too strong to ignore. For them, the idea of a time traveler made the story far more exciting than an old digital camera. The fact that Tyson's fight marked such a symbolic return moment for one of boxing's most powerful figures only added to the legend. It felt fitting that something otherworldly might have happened there. Modern technology in ancient art. Many people believe that ancient art might hide clues of modern technology, pointing to the idea of time travel or advanced civilizations long before recorded history. This idea gained attention through old paintings, carvings, and sculptures that appear to show objects resembling cell phones, laptops, and flying machines. While historians see them as symbols or coincidences, others think they might hint at something far stranger. One popular example is the 1937 carving at a temple in Abydos, Egypt. It seems to show shapes that look like a helicopter, a tank, and even a jet. Some claim it proves that ancient Egyptians saw advanced machines, possibly brought by time travelers. In reality, archaeologists say the carvings are overlapping hieroglyphs caused by erosion and recarving over centuries, but that hasn't stopped the speculation. Another example comes from a Mayan carving that appears to show a man sitting in what looks like a spacecraft. Known as the Palanca astronaut, it's often linked to theories of ancient visitors or travelers from the future. Similarly, a painting from the 15th century titled The Madonna with Saint Giovannino seems to show a glowing object in the sky behind Mary, interpreted by some as a UFO or futuristic craft. The same goes for an old Greek sculpture that appears to show a young woman opening what looks like a laptop. Historians explain it as a jewelry box, but its uncanny resemblance to modern devices fuels endless debate. If you enjoyed exploring these strange clues of time travel in ancient art, don't forget to hit like and share your thoughts in the comments. Subscribe for more deep dives into the mysteries that connect our past, present, and future.